All right, good morning. Everyone's awake, feeling fresh? Okay, here we go. My name is Rudra Mitra. I'm a program manager on the information protection team. And today we're going to walk through information protection for Office 365. Super excited to be here with my colleagues, the team. We're going to show you what's been going on with Office 365 from a security angle, from a compliance angle. And I'm really proud to be here representing the team's work. We've had a lot of stuff. One thing I will tell you is a lot of the work we're going to show you today is very early in progress. So keep that in mind. And this is a demo-heavy session. So a lot of actual running code off of our machines. And so you may have a few glitches, you may have a few UX that's still being baked, but just keep that in mind as we kind of roll through the story today. And with that, welcome. So information protection, the way we think about this is we start with the question for Office 365, how can I protect my data? And when we start with the question, how can we protect your data, our data, we sort of get to thinking about things like security, compliance, protection. We encompass underneath that. And we're trying to think about this not only from what you would expect, the traditional sort of malicious attacker, and how would we keep a cloud service safe against this point of view. We also think about stuff like inadvertent issues that may come up both on the compliance side and the security side. So when we talk about the question, how do I protect my data, we're really trying to take a all-encompassing view, which is both adversarial as well as sort of against protections for compliance, against protections for inadvertent issues with data. So that's the fundamental question we start with. And we try to think about this in context of 365. And of course, we then have that bleed into our server line of products like Exchange, SharePoint, and I'll talk a lot about that. So information protection, as you would expect, we start at a layer within the service first for Office 365, where we think about it being built in, privacy protected by design, and continuously compliant. And think about this as table stakes for information protection or operational controls. What kinds of things am I talking about? This is where we don't have access to the customer data as an engineering team. Our operations team can't take data out of the data centers. Who has physical access to the data centers? These kinds of table stakes protection for data is operational controls. But really the focus of the talk today, and what I'll take you through, is the top layer here, information protection. And we think about these as organizational controls built on top of or encompassing our operational controls as well. These are the controls we give you to take your organizational business processes, business compliance needs, your particular situation, and overlay that on top of the table stakes operational controls we have. So we'll walk through organizational controls that we have in 365 today, and that we will continue to add, and early sneak peeks at that, as well as what will show up in our next server line of products. Together, when we have a good set of operational controls and organizational controls, we think about how can I protect my data being answered with a question of how is this building more trust where my data is going? And trust is the set of you understanding what's in 365 as operational controls and us telling you what do we have for information protection for you. So think about this as privacy plus security plus compliance as information protection. So before we get to answering what are we building and where are we on some of that, let's talk a little bit about what context we're working in. Some of this you'll sort of see in the popular press. Some of this is the situational sort of mind share we have as we walk through this. So people's work expectations. Clearly, all of us are aware of cloud computing, mobile devices proliferating, access of data from anywhere, inadvertent access to these devices, loss of devices. So data that we used to be within the organizational boundary, within our network boundary, we as IT professionals, IT decision makers, IT administrators, we have to think about where is our data flowing that I need to try and secure it. We also have to think about an evolving threat landscape. How are adversarial folks going after the data that you are now entrusting to someone else? Or how is this data more valuable to others? And we'll talk through this a little bit more. And then, of course, we're all aware of regulations and standards that come with being in business, particular segments, other segments. You have to worry about what are the regulatory reasons that I have to think about protect my data a particular way, not a particular way, and this is a rich set of topics as well. But across all of these, sort of the constant you can think about all the themes is everything's changing. We used to have a certain set of premises we'd work with for protecting data, for information protection. We now have to assume these will just continue to evolve and evolve fast. And so whatever we build into the service, into our server line of products, we have to think about change is constant, how am I going to keep ahead of that? And that's a hard thing to do. Hopefully, we walk out today with some answers to that, as well as what we're thinking about next with 365. So let me share some statistics that really ground us in thinking about change being constant. So people's work expectations. This is a pretty mind-boggling stat that in the next decade, next 10 years, we'll increase the amount of data that we have today by 44 times. And that's just an explosion, whereas the people that are guarding the data, that are managing the data, applying compliance to that data, that's only going to go up 100%, 1.4 times. So we really have to think about what do we do with this volume of data that's exploding, and how do we secure it and guard it, and how do we be compliant with it? Along with these sort of other couple of stats that I have up here, which really are interesting. They're not of the malicious variety, they're not of the, the security vector, but you can see that there's a large number of people that will, when surveyed, say, yeah, I use my personal email, my personal IM system, I use my personal whatever to transfer my company's data around, as well as 58% in this particular study said, I've accidentally sent my data to the wrong person. And that's a huge deal. I mean, if your company's data is one of your closely guarded secrets, or at least needs to be private, and it's being leaked out inadvertently, you can't really take the mindset of my network is the boundary anymore. You have to kind of think through how people are addressing their use case of data, and what is it that you try to do when you try to get into a protection scheme for it and a compliance scheme for it that isn't just saying lock it down. How do we work with them to help them do what they're trying to do, stay productive, but avoid these accidental leakages of data? And with 365, we think we have some early answers to these, as well as we're continuing to build on this path. No surprise here. The number of devices, of course, that we all carry around. A couple years ago, I used to have one phone and a laptop I'd walk around with. Now I at least have a tablet, a laptop, a phone, sometimes two phones. So the number of devices is, of course, exploding. This particular statistic says 20 billion by 2020, which is more than the number of people on the face of this earth. But each of those is potentially syncing your corporate data, your organizational data, your work data down to them, and is a target for loss, attack, corruption of data. There's many different things that could go on. And so your data is really flowing in a network, as we saw in the intro video, and we have to think about it holistically. Now, from the malicious point of view, the attack vector point of view, this is a sort of a landscape that's changing very, very rapidly as well. In the last about 7 years, there's been 3,500 known breaches of data. That's just the tip. Those are the ones that people have felt they can disclose, have been disclosed, are out. There's way more. We know that there's probably 10x more than that sort of never surface, right? If you're not willing to sort of disclose that this happened. Each of these, when you aggregate them together, the total loss is about 600 million records that have either because of breach or because of reported breach, we know and have been able to measure, have sort of flowed out just in the US. This isn't even a global stat. And then on average, the cost of one of these is, of course, a couple $100 per record when you amortize the cost of a breach being remediated, the forensics, the PR damage. When you holistically look at that, you're really saying there's a large cost materially in addition to the PR, the brand, and whatnot. And this means that, each breach that a company, an organization deals with, if they can afford it, we're talking about multi-million dollars, probably $5, $6 million worth of damage that happens each time one of these have happened. And so what's going on with these attacks before we sort of start to get into solutions a little bit? So early in the 2000s, it was, of course, some of the obvious exploits that were sort of talked about, and the attackers were sort of semi-professionals, script kiddies, sort of kind of going after these attacks, and the volume was, a certain amount. And then as we sort of progress forward, what we saw over the last 5, 6 years, and think about the progress of cloud computing as we kind of go through this timeline as well, really started to become profitable, and organized crime got behind this, and there was a bunch of other interesting things like fraud and spam and whatnot. And so it's exploding, but it's also becoming monetarily more valuable to go after these. And then finally, sort of in the last couple of years, we've seen nation states get behind this, as well as very organized activities, which means that this is no longer of the variety of, bulk mail and spam attacks that look not very professional to a security professional. This is now your people, if you're an IT professional, your organization potentially being under attack by very sophisticated but also targeted attacks, very crafted attacks going after particular people, particular departments, and becoming more vulnerable and more targeted because it's not a broad spectrum attack anymore. In addition, compliance and regulations are sort of also an undercurrent that we're all working through. And as an organizational sort of administrator, an IT business decision maker, you have to kind of keep this in the forefront of your mind, sort of thinking about what regulation am I working with? So I've got to deal with these attacks and these threats. And I have to also worry about regulation and compliance. So amazing stat here. 90% of all corporations, this is across all sizes, within the US and worldwide, are at any point in time involved in some sort of litigation. If you're lucky enough to be having revenues of more than $1 billion, you're dealing with 147 compliance or related issues at any point in time, legal issues. That's a large volume to be managing. And if you happen to not have your data squared away, if you're not sure exactly how to meet this sort of high obligation that comes with becoming a larger enterprise, that's a lot of effort to go back and retrofit. And then finally, if you have to produce documentation for a legal case, if you have to meet some fiduciary responsibility, regulatory responsibility, and you're going around looking for data, that's about $1 million you're spending in people time, effort, analyst time, maybe going after and looking for this. So there's a high cost, not only to the attack side of this, but there's a high cost to organizations of all sizes when you're going after the compliance side of this. So it's a pretty challenging environment when you put all of this together. But with 365, we try to holistically think about not just the security side of it, or the compliance side of it. We try to bring it all together within protection, and we try to sort of work towards this promise of working your data so that everywhere it exists, we're going to build in, remember that diagram I showed you of organizational facing controls. We're going to go after those and give you the ability so that we protect your data from a compliance point of view and a security point of view, no matter where it lives, where it moves, and how it is shared. And so we want to really think about this all up together, and we're going to share with you what we've done and how we've put this looking forward as well. That's not what my office looks like, but it's close. We've, with 365, tried to step back and over the last 3 to 4 years, really think about how can we differentiate, what would our pitch be, what would our approach, what's the soul to the approach that we build, and how do we go after all of this in a manner which doesn't compromise security, of course, but also doesn't pitch IT and work, IT and individuals sort of against each other, but involve and sort of bring it together in a more sort of seamless way. And this is what sort of the soul of 365 looks like when we think about this particular space. We think about our protections being pervasive. Imagine the volume of data we just talked about, whether you're a small company or a large company. We want our protections to be pervasive. It lives with the data, it travels with the data, it's available where your data is. It's transparent. You know and we know what's going on with the data. We want to know because it improves the quality of service we provide. You want to know it's your data. We're just the custodians of it for you. And people-centric. The approach is, of course, easy to talk about. The implementation is hard. But if we can involve people in the protection of data, we have a much higher chance of succeeding versus trying to lock down how work is done. And it really then ends up becoming this problem of trying to figure out all the places that you have to lock down. There's certain things that, of course, have to be guarded with a moat. But there are other things you really try to protect in line. And that's sort of the third piece of the secret sauce that we want to build. Before going too much further, so what's the mindset you're in? Either if you're in the audience here or you're thinking about sort of what we have and what we're going to be demoing to you. You're either a business decision maker, an IT decision maker, so you're looking at this at a sort of an angle and looking at 365 saying, what am I buying into? What's the ROI on this stuff? So you should think about that. We think also about compliance officers deeply if these are larger organizations, because these are the folks that have to meet those compliance requirements and cost that gets put on organizations, of course. You could be an IT administrator thinking about how do I meet the security need for my data? How do I lock down the data that I have? How do I better serve my users in terms of productivity, but also the needs of compliance and security? Or you could be in a smaller business thinking about, I don't have very sophisticated needs, but what I want is a fairly turnkey, simple solution so I feel protected out of the gate. And hopefully with 365, what you see as you go through this is you say, yeah, that's pretty easy to get up and going with. It's built right into the package. I understand what's there. So let me talk a little bit about pervasive for all of those personas, depending on which one you fit. So pervasive, as I said, is the protections that we apply to the data, and we make sure that we think about applying it everywhere. So we're not thinking just about, an application of this to a mobile device. We're not just thinking about this as protecting the data when it's within our data center boundaries. We're thinking about it on every place it flows to, whether it's a client, whether it's the Office client's Excel, Word, PowerPoint, whether you're moving it to a different system that's not Microsoft. If you're moving it from server to your own other cloud because you have multi-cloud deployments. We have to think about protections that are pervasive, and we really think about this sort of in three ways. We think about unified policy being applied to the data so that once you've authored it with the data, you're not having to think about policy for your email, separately from policy for your SharePoint or your OneDrive data, separate from some other system. You really want to author your policies once and have it flow with the data, have it be authored in one place, such as retain my data at least for 30 days. Okay, then have that apply across all the systems. The promise is if you don't want to apply retention, you want to actually not have any data, you want to delete it within use case, and then it's done. You don't want any retention at all because you're in a highly regulated industry. Let's have that go through all the systems as well. So author once is super important because it is the promise of then I don't have to manage complexity across many systems. Available across, of course, services, but also policy across applications is important. You want to control it at the endpoint as well as on the service side, and so we really try to meet that spirit with pervasive as well. And then I've mentioned this a couple of times, really with the volume of data, you can't really think about it as an afterthought going back through policy on top of the data. You really want to handle this as the data is flowing through the system when it's authored at the time of creation. So these are really the three anchors around being pervasive with our policy and our protections that we try to build into 365. And next what we'll do is, as I said, we're going to be demo heavy today. So we're going to show you how we have policy that flows with data, as well as how we have pervasive controls built into the system. And so to demo this, we're going to have an IT administrator sort of persona as the key, the anchor for the demo. Think about that. But of course, we'll go through some use cases here as well. And helping me is going to be Levon, who's a group program manager on information protection. He's going to walk out and show me a few demos here.
Thank you, Rudy. Good morning, everybody.
mic not working?
So to start off the demo, I'm going to start with our compliance center. And you can see me being logged in here into the admin console of Office 365. And as I start the trigger of the compliance side, you will notice that it is natively built into Office 365 admin console. And this view alone emphasizes our vision for providing administrators and compliance experts with a single place where they can accomplish all the tasks across multiple different workloads and services and devices. You can see the single place to do the archiving, device management, data loss prevention, e-discovery, reporting and auditing, retention, etc. What I'm going to show you today is I'll start with archiving. And with any traditional archiving solution, you know that before you can configure the archiving itself, you have to configure synchronization or importing the data from your, let's say, mail system to your archiving solution. And later on, you need to maintain the synchronization of data from the mail system to the archiving solution. Here, with built-in capabilities in Office 365, all you need to do is to enable archiving for a given user is click literally single button. So I have here one person who happens to have exactly the same name as I do, and he's the only one with disabled archive. So, and this demo is going to illustrate how easy it is to enable archiving. All you need to do here is click enable, and voila. It's done. So the archiving has been enabled for this person. And you can say, but this is not a new feature in Office 365. It's been there for a while. In fact, it's widely used. Why am I demonstrating it today? Well, the first and foremost reason, it's a very canonical example of our principle of built-in capabilities. You don't need to import the data anywhere. It's just available right there in the native store of your mailboxes. But is there anything to announce today? Well, obviously, I wouldn't be asking this question if there wasn't. In the past, when your archiving, the size of the archiving mailbox is reaching limit, you had to call Microsoft Help Desk to ask to extend that limit. Moving forward, you will not have to do it. We introduced a new feature called automated archive scaling, and the system will detect when you approach the threshold and will automatically expand the size of your archive mailbox, effectively making it unlimited. So that's the first announcement I'd like to make today. Now let's take a look at another aspect of Compliance Center. Let's take a look at retention. And one policy I want to show here is preservation. This guy, Levon, continues to go into trouble. And now he's on suspect list in this organization. And all the documents, all his mails need to be preserved, even if this person tries to delete them. So what administrator can do, you can see this policy setting page. Administrator can easily, in a single place, configure preservation of Levon's mailbox. In addition to this, he can configure preservation of the particular SharePoint and OneDrive for Business sites. He can send or set the conditions. In this particular case, I chose to search for few keywords. One of them is fraud, and you can specify the start and end date if there is one, and then apply this policy. The interesting aspect here to emphasize is that this policy is going to be applied across multiple workloads in Office 365. In Exchange, as you saw this, because I enabled preservation on the mailbox. In SharePoint, as you saw that. And even in Skype for Business, because the data from Skype for Business is stored in Exchange. So with a single place, within a single place, administrator was able to apply this preservation policy across Office 365 workloads. What's important, again, this solution is built in. So all of the documents and mails of this individual, past and future, will be preserved even if he is trying to delete them. Now let's talk about a different topic. Let's talk about Exchange Online protection. For the last few years, the Exchange Online protection has been an integral part of protecting mailboxes of Office 365 users from spam and malware. Every single mail that goes in or out from Office 365 cloud mailboxes is filtered by Exchange Online protection. But we all witnessed that over the last couple of years, the attacks of bad guys are continuing to evolve, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. So two of the common attack vectors associated with email are delivering zero-day attack in the attachment in mail, as well as sending in mail URL pointing to a malicious website. To help our administrators and security teams to protect their users against these attacks, we are announcing advanced threat protection set of capabilities that will be shortly available in Exchange Online protection. Now let me tell you a little bit more about this capability. For that, I'll go back to my administrator's console, and I'll go to Exchange Admin Console, and I'll navigate to Advanced Threat. So let's start with safe attachments. If I enable this policy, what is going to happen is as mail passes through our filtering pipeline, suspected attachments will be detonated in a sandboxed environment. And if the system determines that this mail or this attachment is malicious, then administrator has a choice of blocking this individual mail altogether, or replacing the mail, delivering the mail but ripping out the attachment from it. Or if there is preference, you can start this feature with monitoring mode or what-if mode, where you'll just observe what would be the impact of this feature. It's important to emphasize that we've heard a number of our large customers to say that we have security teams ourselves, and we would like to get the samples of what you think is malicious. And we enable that capability. And you can specify here the email address of the administrator who is going to receive the sample that we considered to be malicious. And finally, on this slide, I do want to call out rich granularity that we provide administrators to decide on who they want to apply this policy to. You can choose to apply it to an individual user, or a group, or domain, or entire tenant. Or you can apply some exceptions as well. So that's the safe attachments capability. Let's talk a little bit about safe links. What does it do? Today, before introducing this capability, as emails arriving to Office 365 mailboxes, they go through Exchange Online protection, and our filtering system is evaluating reputation of URLs as the mails pass through our pipeline. But attackers continuously evolve their attack vectors and techniques. And what they started doing is imagine that they compromise a decent website with a decent reputation. They send the mail with pointers to that still decent website. And a few minutes down the road, they weaponize those destination websites. They introduce their downloadable malware. It could be zero-day, or they can turn it into a phishing site. But by that time, mail already cleared the house, the clearing house. And now the end user clicks on the mail or on the URL. So to prevent against this vector of attack, what Safe Links is doing is we're rewriting the URL in the mail to point back to Office 365 web service, so that the evaluation of reputation of this destination will be done at the time when user clicks on it, and not at the time of delivery of email, thus protecting against the attack vector that I just described. I'll show you in a few minutes experience of the user, of the end user, but for now I want to continue talking about administrator's experience. So you can see that administrator can specify here a set of exceptions. If there are particular URLs that you do not want to be overwritten, and you do not want to be checked and users can go directly to that site, you have that capability. And what's also important here is administrator has ability to decide whether user should be just warned that it is bad site, or user should be simply blocked from going there. It is up to administrator's discretion. And last, but definitely not least, a capability that comes with this feature is ability of the service to trace all the URLs, all the sites visited by your users. I'll show you in a second how that information is useful. But what I want to call out here is that we know that some countries have more stringent privacy laws than others. And if you believe that your country will not allow tracing the URL clicks, then you can disable this capability. But if you are allowed to trace those clicks, here's the scenario that I'm truly excited about. Just think how many of you, once in a while, have to do an investigation of who clicked in my organization of thousands of people on this particular bad URL. It could be a phishing site, it could be downloadable malware. Often it takes days, sometimes weeks, to do those investigations to find out who are the victims in my organization. With new capability that we introduced here, and I'll go to URL tracing here, you can easily discover who in a certain given period of time, for example, in the past 7 days, clicked on which link, and you can search that based on the links. So you can see here the comprehensive list of all the clicks in your organization based on the sites that they visited and what happened, whether they were blocked from going there or whether they went there. So when or if you or one of your users falls victim to a phishing attack, you can easily find out who else in your organization may be a victim of that attack within seconds instead of days and weeks. This, I think, is a tremendously profound impact on how much time you're going to be spending investigating this security incidents. Now let me switch to the user experience and demonstrate what user experience is going to be with the Safe Link feature. So this must be a familiar screen of iPad. Yes, you see that? So I'm going to my mail here, and I'm going to look at the mail. Hello. That contains some good links as well as some bad links. And you'll see that user experience practically not impacted by the fact of the checking with web service on Office 365. When I click on this Bing link, oops. Oh, there must be internet connection here.
Your internet connection.
No, apparently I lost the connection. I'm not going to try to scavenge this part of the video or demo, but what I'm going to call out is that when I'm clicking on the good URL, the impact, the performance impact is less than few milliseconds, and user doesn't see much difference. He just goes directly to that destination website. What happens if he clicks on the bad URL, then he's shown a warning message that tells him that this is a bad site, and depending on administrator's configuration, he can go to that site or not. With this, I'll switch back to the, click please, to the deck. And what I announced today is the availability of Compliance Center. You've seen that, a single place to accomplish all of your compliance needs. We announced automatic archive scaling that is arriving within a matter of few weeks. And we announced also advanced threat protection that is currently in the preview, and it is expected to be in GA and available to everybody in June. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Levon. So Levon's demos, as he was showing you, some early stuff in there, but the key point was the archiving stuff he showed you, as well as the advanced threat protection stuff. Think about it. He went through a couple of clicks to turn it on. It's part of the service. He turns it on. And then each user just has it as part of their data retention. They have the protection on the devices. We had a little bit of trouble with the Wi-Fi on the iPad here. But the point being, whether you're on an iPad, you're on a PC, you're going to get that protection no matter where you go. So pervasive built in with those couple of sort of proof points really is one key pillar of the service and the protection we want to provide. So that's number one. Number two is transparent. So when we are applying these protections, when we are applying sort of this policy to your data, we also want to make sure you are able to sort of see what's going on with your data from a compliance angle, from a security angle, but also that you are able to find within your organization the data you seek at any point in time. And so you can kind of see transparent is a key philosophy both inward to the organization as well as from us as a service provider to you. How do we make sure we're fully being transparent in what we're doing with the data, how we're filtering it, how we're moving it around. So proactive visibility into the data, activities with your data are sort of the essence. And really, we want to empower IT organizations that are sort of moving to the cloud, thinking about the cloud as having visibility, because they have to then do stuff with that data. They have to provide views, they have to do analysis. That's the move up and provide higher level value on top of the data. That's one, that's great. Organizations can see what's going on. Number two, that's great. And then number three, we really are taking to heart this sort of protection embraced by third parties and extended by third parties for 365, so that what we think is a cloud sort of transparency around 365, you can then take and intersect with other clouds. The reality is the world is one of multi-cloud or cloud and on-prem. And so transparency is also take your data, take your metadata, and be able to intersect it with other systems and figure out the higher value sort of understanding of what's going on with your data protections and compliance across many things. So with that, transparent is really another core tenet, and we're going to have the persona of a compliance officer work through a couple of things here. And so joining me on stage is going to be Kamal, and she's going to show you some new, right out of the kitchen here, transparency demos. All right.
Thank you, Rudy. So let me get set up here. Hello, everyone. So I'm here to talk about transparent. Transparent means that once your data is in Office 365, you have the ability to view it, act on it, search it, and be aware of history of any action taken on it. The second thing it means is also extensibility. So visibility gives you the ability to see the data. Extensibility gives you the ability to take solutions that we might provide or extend them with homegrown or partner solutions to achieve governance of your information. So before I talk about how exactly you can see all this data, I'd like to address a question that you've asked us. It's great that once my data is in Office 365, I can do all these cool things with it, but how do I get it into Office 365? What's the easy, fast way to actually ingest it? Well, to answer that question, I'm delighted to announce that we are enabling drive shipping for email content into Office 365. Let's take a look. So one of the questions that we've gotten from you, our customers, is, I have content on PSDs and file shares, documents on user desktops. I have Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter data. Well, how do I get that into Office 365 and into the compliance boundary? Because all this content that's spread out in my data source isn't in Microsoft. So what we're introducing is the ability today to ship your data on a physical drive by a process within the service. And end-to-end, what we're looking at here is you're actually able to create a drive within your on-premises environment. It's encrypted with a key that you define during preparation of the drive, and then you get a FedEx routing number that sends this content to the service. If you want to see this complete end-to-end demo in detail, please do attend the archiving session, which is later this week. But the intent here is to show you how there is a chain of custody to bring this information into the service. So you prepare your hard drives, you create a mapping file. And the nature of this mapping file is that it defines the users that you want to actually ingest the data into Office 365. So if you have a set of PSTs, we actually analyze those PSTs, and then you define, based on that analysis, which user in Office 365 you want to ingest that content into. And then when you want to do search and view content associated with that, you're able to do it from a single console. Let's get out of this for a moment and take a look at that. We also have the ability, if you don't want to actually use the shipping of physical hard drives, but use the slower mechanism, you can use network ingestion to bring this content and upload it over the network. And this is appropriate for some of our smaller customers. So now that you've actually gotten this data into Office 365, you want to be able to do a search of it. And what I'd like to show you is an early look at our compliance search. This is the ability to search across your Office 365 corpus of data. Just as Levon showed you, we can do retention and preservation. You can do search across Exchange, Skype for Business, OneDrive, SharePoint, and we're extending this to the ingested data. So a common scenario we ran into in the service recently was that we had a customer who was being investigated. And they were being investigated because of their dealings with another company. And that company was in the news for some corruption. They weren't really certain what it was about. But they wanted to be prepared. Now, since they didn't really know what exactly the issue was, they just decided to search all the content in their enterprise. And the name of the conglomerate was Contoso. And the specific project was Wingtips. So I am now going to do a search of my entire corpus of my tenant for Contoso or Wingtips. And while that search is running, I'm going to take a look at some of the other searches that I've done in my environment to actually support this investigation. So one of the things I did was take a look at sensitive information. I wanted to make sure that any sensitive information that was shared associated with this in my environment was actually found. So this is if any mails were exchanged with Contoso or Wingtips that had credit card numbers in it. Or another search I could do using the syntax of if it's viewable by external users was anything with this keyword actually shared out of my organization? And the third piece of this is, since all my content is not actually in Office 365, the data that was ingested from Facebook and Twitter, did that contain any interesting data? So let's take a look at that specifically. So here I have a search that reveals to me all the Facebook messages associated with this particular issue. So here I have people posting on Facebook saying that Ignite is awesome. They're setting up their Twitter account. They have an invitation from Microsoft Connect. And then here's one that actually looks sort of interesting. It says, watch the Contoso Wingtips earning release tomorrow. No surprises. And here I have an indication that there was an earnings release that they didn't necessarily reference in their email, but they did actually tweet about it. And this is, as you all know, not acceptable. Earnings releases are confidential until they're publicly announced. So here, I was able to find this data even though it wasn't within or created within the Microsoft security boundary. So let me get out of this and go back and take a look at that search that we just performed that actually looked at my entire corpus of data. And what we're going to see over here is that we've also built some refinement and improvements in the way that we actually do the search of this data. When you get the results from this content, you are able to see hit highlighting, as you saw with the tweet. So since this is a live demo, and this is a large corpus of mailboxes, bear with the time for it to actually retrieve all the results. And here, I'm going to look through this and see that, my search for Contoso is highlighted. So I'm actually able to see why this result was retrieved in the search. And our intent is to now take this essential platform capability of being able to search all your content, hit highlight, use query syntax like proximity, and, ors, et cetera, and extend it to more data types and more refined searches. Now, wouldn't it be nice if all searches and all investigations happened that quickly? Does anyone know a litigation that ever retrieved data that quickly? No, I don't either. So the reality is the amount of data you have to deal with is enormous. And you're not really able to define a keyword and find that information. What you actually have to do is analyze that content and find other ways to make sense of it, other ways to decide what is the shape of it, what are the themes with it. Well, I'd like to use this opportunity to introduce, in January this year, we acquired a company that was a front-runner in predictive coding called Equivio, and we're thrilled to welcome them to the Microsoft family. What Equivio gives you the ability to do is take large corpus of data and to analyze it and create themes around it so that you can then cull it down into the smallest set in a way that an existing keyword search will not allow you to do. So let's take a look. So I have, at this point, done an e-discovery query, done a keyword search, culled my data set down to a certain subset, and I am looking at it within the Equivio experience. Individual results is not useful to me. That's the experience I had previously. So now what I'm going to look at is, what are the themes that are yielded by this data? And I want to see these themes by the total number of files, so I can see where are the themes that the volume is really great. So looking through this, I see that one theme, which is very positive, is going good, love, hey, hope. Not really relevant. Another one that looks interesting is deal. A third one is agreements. Now, agreements, since my interaction with this particular company was around what kind of contract negotiation we had, is actually interesting to me. So let me take a look at agreements. And what I see is that within agreements, there are a bunch of other themes that are actually interesting and that have significant overlap. And here I have something that says confidentiality and draft and comments. And what I can see from this is that this may be the way that I actually find the needle in the haystack. I had an enormous corpus of data, I culled it down, and now I'm able to find themes within themes. Another thing that I might actually do with this content is go back to the themes and view it by time. So I know that my interaction with this company was actually in a particular year. And since I have this information that I'm interested in conversations or email content that was generated during this particular year, I'm going to go down and look at, during 2010, what were the themes now within 2010? So what I've done is narrowed down this great corpus, seen it come down to agreements, get it down to the year, and finally, why don't I just throw in something here that says contract and see what this yields me. Oops, sorry. And this gives lawyers and HR and early case assessment folks the ability to narrow down this content without actually being forced to review every single piece of it. So at the heart of this is the challenge with litigation today. Today, when you do litigation, the way that you determine if content is relevant or not relevant is you go and read every single piece of content. You go and read a document. That essentially defines for you why litigation is so incredibly expensive. What we hope to do with this technology is level the playing field. You're able to take an action that today is a human rote action of reviewing a set of content, determining if it's relevant or not, and then instead transfer it to a piece of software. And the way we do it is that we take lawyers, have them review, oops, let me actually switch real quick to, what we do is we take a set of lawyers, and today if they have to review, say, 2 terabytes of data or 200 million documents, what you have them do is actually review and evaluate if something is relevant or pertinent to a case for only 2,000 documents, and then you extend it to the larger corpus of data. Software does for you what it can better than a human. And what's interesting is 6 or 7 years ago, not an accepted technology. Today, this is becoming part of case law. And the reality is because there have been a couple of white papers that suggest, and this might surprise you, that 3 lawyers in a room reaching assessments of content were less accurate than several computers assessing the same content. Okay. So now that we've done a search, viewed the content, analyzed it, let's move to another key piece of providing you visibility and transparency. If you bring your data to Office 365, we'll allow you to see it, but we also, our responsibility is to allow you and ensure that you see every single action taken on your data. This means actions taken by us, the Microsoft admins, as well as actions taken by you, the tenant admins. So to enable that, I am thrilled to announce the new Office 365 platform, the Office 365 Activity Report. And this is, I'm going to kick the search off and then tell you, this is a new pipeline. What we have done is gone to the corpus of Office 365 workloads. We have instrumented and ensured that any action taken within those workloads is then gathered, piped, and stored in a compliant store. This means immutability, SLA, retention are all managed within the store. And we then expose that data to you in two ways. One is this experience that we're actually going to show you that does a search. And this is essentially searching every single action taken by OneDrive, SharePoint, and Exchange. And we are generating right now 10 million events a day for OneDrive and SharePoint. And if you add Exchange to that, that number is only going to grow. And this allows you to answer some key questions. It allows you to answer the question of what did this user do in Office 365? What did this document have done to it within Office 365? And finally, what are the correlation actions? When the user did X, what are the other things that happened associated with X? So piping down this, you can see that a file was fetched, a file was viewed, passwords were changed, logons failed, logons succeeded. And this is just an early look at the window into all this information. That said, we're not interested in keeping this all for ourselves. We want to make sure that the accessibility to this is actually available to partners and to you. And so one of the things we've learned at Microsoft is that this information is great, we'll build a solution for it, but we also need to make it available so you can stream, search, and feed. So the second thing I am delighted to announce is the Office 365 Activity API. Under manage.microsoft.com, the existing REST APIs, with a single node, you will now be able to export, search, stream all of this information about your Office 365 tenant. Moreover, we're announcing the partner preview, that in June, we will have partners now able to build on this content and build solutions. So you can decide whether you use the experience that we provide for you or the experiences that partners or your own homegrown developers provide. And really, the reality is we will be innovating together at the same time on the same corpus of data. So don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at what a couple of partners have actually done. So the first partner I want to talk about is Better Cloud. And they've taken the approach of giving you a console where you can actually see who has access to your information and the ability to see when an action is taken in SharePoint, what were the last 10 or 20 actions that resulted in content being deleted or being shared. This lends itself to the investigation scenario really well. You want to know whenever, say, a certain piece of sensitive content is deleted or externally viewable. And so what this gives you is an admin dashboard that exposes that information to you. You're able to go see, who are my administrators who have these global permissions? And then you can take a look at all the actions taken within an hour or less. So if you have a threat or you're informed about an issue in your environment, immediately you can see the activity or the life cycle of that piece of content. Now, the second demo I'd like to show you, or the video, is Loric by Polera. And they've taken an approach of surfacing for you all the anomalies and threats in your environment. Anomalies fall into the following categories. You either have an anomaly where an action is just wrong, a policy violation. You could have an anomaly which is of degree. A couple of failed logons, no big deal. But 100 failed logons, that's an issue you want to be alerted about. Or the third anomaly is only found when you have correlations. These two actions happening together reveal a threat. I am able to share out a document, I have a set of failed logons, and I violate a policy, or I email that document outside my company. All those three together give you a strong correlation of an anomalous or a threat happening. So let's take a look. You have here a dashboard that is product agnostic. We want our partners to give you the ability to span multiple clouds, so we will provide all the APIs that allows them to do that. They're then able to go look at a set of failed logons. That's a user behavior risk. It doesn't necessarily suggest that this is a significant threat yet, but it is a slight deviation from the regular behavior. But now we graph that user risk. And what we actually see is that there's a spike in failed logons and failed actions happening at a particular point in time. What you have is a degree anomaly. This is happening too often for it to be a commonplace activity. And then correlated with that failed logon, what are the other actions that are happening at the same time? I see a set of geographical locations that seem suspicious. And then when I drill into that, in addition to finding out that these failed logons come from an area that is odd, which is my correlation anomaly number 2, I also see that some of that content was actually transferred outside the Microsoft ecosystem. So something was actually shared outside and transferred somewhere else, as well as mailed outside my organization, which was a clear policy violation. And so now, as an administrator, I have taken all these different pieces of information and put them together. And all of that was possible with the Office 365 APIs and the Office 365 data that we've exposed to you. So to conclude that, we had 3 capabilities: the ability to discover and search your content, the ability to view every single action on it, and finally, the ability to analyze it. And our promise to you is when you give us your data, you own it. We are just the guardians of it. And to conclude, I would actually like to call up the 2 auditing partners so you know that we didn't just create that video, it was actually real, and have them come up on stage. Please, Ganesh. Michael. So, introduce you to Better Cloud and Polera, who helped work with us to create this solution. And I am also delighted to announce, with correlation with that, the preview program is open to these partners for the Audit API, as well as for Equivio, where we will now be, if you are an Office 365 customer, if you want the ability to analyze that data within Office 365 using Equivio Zoom, you can sign up for the preview program. Could we give our partners a big hand? And thank you. They're dying to get off stage. They're like, this is good. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, so a lot of early stuff Kamal showed you, of course. She showed you drive shipping, new announce. We've got the e-discovery stuff with Equivio, great. We've got auditing, as you saw in her demo, very early code. And then, of course, the very exciting activity API that's coming out as well. So a lot of good stuff when we think about transparency. And then the final pillar, we've looked at a couple of them, is now people-centric. And people-centric is sort of the third piece of our soul when we think about information protection. Getting people to be part of the solution as opposed to trying to put them sort of at arm's length and IT locking things down only is not going to be a recipe for sort of continued long-term success. And so we think about it as, how do we differentiate from others by making our cloud be one that involves others, involves the worker as part of the compliance and the security solution, and then build around them. So that really is how we want to kind of evolve as we go forward, as well as what we have in product right now. We're making sure that We think about the worker as part of the compliance solution, the security solution, so that productivity is not compromised. We want to make sure corporate data is accessed and available on bring your own device, but that we do have policy with it, that we can figure out whether it's a device that's managed or not, and we can take care of policy that goes with it. And of course, in context, train users on what is the company policy, so that we're not after the fact coming back through sifting through a lot of data and attempting to clean it up, but tell them in context what's going on. And so the next set of demos are really thinking about how, when I am working with data, how should I be trained, using, be compliant with my policies, and overall the organization gets a level of security and organization. So to help me out with this, Asaf Kashi is going to come on stage and walk us through a couple of demos. And keep in mind, here you're thinking about this as the information worker while you're in context of working.
Thank you, Rudy. Good morning, everybody. We'll get the demos going. So I'm going to talk about people-centric today, and we're going to focus on the information worker. But before we do that, since we've gotten all familiar with the Compliance Center, IT folks, IT admins are also people, so we're going to start with that real briefly to show you how we configure all that people-centric education and empowerment. So what I have on the screen right now is that Compliance Center that you've seen already a number of times today, and I'm in the Data Loss Prevention tab. In here, I'm going to click on New, just to show you that not only do we build a platform, we actually build a solution as well. So you can see that we have built-in policies for DLP, which I'm using to demo people-centric today. We have sensitive types built in, so you don't have to be a compliance officer expert. You don't have to be a payment card industry expert. It's all built in. Of course, you can tune it to manage it to your organization, but you get a really easy, fast start. So we'll close this page and we're going to look at one of our pre-configured policies here for the demo. I've just opened the PCI policy, and I'm not going to walk through every piece here. You can see there's locations, rules, general, but in one of the rules, the interesting piece that is very much the trigger for our people-centric, our education piece and our empowerment piece is the notification and policy tips. So if I look down here in the Actions tab, I moved pretty quickly through this, you can see that I'm sending a notification when this particular DLP rule is going to hit, and with that notification, I'm going to notify the owner, the person that last modified, the owner of the site itself, as well as put a policy tip. And in some cases, I'm going to allow override. Override is this really powerful notion where we're involving the information worker, the end user, as part of the compliance decision. They're usually the expert. They're usually the one that, at authoring time, in context of their productivity surface, they're able to make a decision that is usually more relevant than some policy on the back end applied to everybody in your organization. Again, we can do both. This gives you the richness. So let's switch gears and really get into the information worker here. So I'm going to switch over to my email. Now, for those of you who've been familiar with our DLP solution, great. This is probably very common for you. If you have never seen our DLP solution before, here's our messaging part of the DLP solution. The interesting thing here is I have an email already drafted to Jeremy, and I'm including some sensitive information in an Excel attachment. The system has already scanned this and popped up a policy tip. Again, this is in context of my the surface, my productivity surface, so it's where I'm working day to day. In this case, it's OA. This works in Outlook as well, and has been in Exchange. So this is all the old news. This has been around for about a year and a half or so, all our messaging DLP functionality. So if I switch gears over to some of the newer announcements with DLP in OneDrive and SharePoint, we're going to look at a message that says, hey, I've shared a document, that same attachment or a similar attachment, in this case the Ignite partner data, with Jeremy. And you can see this is a standard OneDrive sharing dialog. And if I look at the next mail that the system sent me, it looks like that somehow either sharing was changed, the content is changed. The system has detected that this is a piece of sensitive information and it has restricted access to this document. So I can click on this link and follow it over to SharePoint. And what's going to happen is SharePoint's opening directly to that library, specifically to that policy tip. Again, policy tip in OA, policy tip in Outlook, policy tip in SharePoint, OneDrive. And you can see that it's explaining to me that it's conflicting with a policy in my business. It's saying that this particular one is shared outside my organization, and it contains sensitive information, in this case, credit cards. For this one, I don't have an override. I only have, the user can report a false positive, but again, they can interact with it, they can correct it. It is not locked down to them as the owner or last modifier, but it is no longer shared externally. As soon as the system detected that this was sensitive and violating the policy, we've locked it down without destroying the data. Once the user fixes that, all the permissions will be returned. So again, it's not a destructive operation. This is one of the first actions that we have in our preview today, and over time we'll add more actions such as encryption, quarantine, maybe move the file over to somewhere else, etc. Now, if I was to hover over this icon from the library and not use that email to get here, I'd get the same experience. If I click on the 3 dots to see a little preview, you can see that access is blocked because it's conflicting. So again, this is permeating the entire productivity surface. It's not a one-off plugin. It is in every one of the expected surfaces for the user. Now, this is an Excel file, so why not just open it in Excel? Let's take a look at DLP in clients, DLP in Office clients, specifically Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. You can see that after the file opened up, within a second or so, it seemed, a policy tip popped up. You have the standard, hey, this is read-only, I can edit it, I can interact with the system, but there's also a policy tip. So again, the same education and empowerment is across all of the productivity surfaces. We're continuing to expand that both on the server workload side, server service, as well as the end user applications. If I clicked on this tip, I can see the backstage. It's telling me a little more information here. Again, that familiar, hey, you know what? We detected some credit cards. You can click on Learn More. This will allow, this will go to a business configured or a customer configured link. It doesn't have to go back to Microsoft. It can go to your specific compliance page inside your company that might be explaining the policy in layman's terms, so a user might understand it better. So again, I've showed you both on the user side as well as how do I configure that from the admin side. Now, since I'm talking about documents, let's switch over a little bit, and we need an iPad. All right, so what I have here, we talked about user empowerment and bringing my own devices was as part of people-centric. Here I have my personal iPad. Some days it's my kid's iPad, some days it's my iPad. I have my business files on here, so if I clicked on OneDrive, you can see these are the files that showed up in that same OneDrive that we just talked about. Now this is a managed device enrolled in through Office 365 MDM, therefore I have access to my files, my business files. At the same time, I have some photos, personal photos. This one happens to be Sedona. And then I have my email. Again, some personal email, but at the same time, I have my Office 365 email. So you can see I have, this is both a personal and a home device. Now, one thing that in the past has had to happen is when a device is lost or a person leaves the company, the IT organization decides to wipe that out. They wipe the device. Well, that's great, except that the end user experience is not really a happy place, right, in that world. So let's switch over to our admin console again. And here I'm going to click on my mobile devices. You can see that I'm in Office 365 admin. I'm clicking on my Office devices, my mobile devices, and you can see that the Asaf Kashi iPad is the first iPad. What I'm going to do is click on Selective Wipe. And the idea here is that this should only wipe the business content off this iPad. And I just switched over to my iPad. And the reason for that is both for user happiness, let's say that. You notice that that email just disappeared in real time. We'll talk about how that happened in a second. But it's also regulatory. It turns out that some countries, especially some European countries with really strong privacy regulations, require the IT organization or disallow the IT organization from wiping any personal information. The company does not own the personal information on the device, therefore they may not delete it. This selective wipe gives you that ability. Whether the person was let go, they decided to give the iPad back to their kids, they're not sure where it is, you no longer have to destroy it. You can see my personal email is here, there's my inbox, but my work email, the profile, is actually gone. If I clicked on OneDrive, you can see the orientation's a little odd, but I was prepared for this little thing. I have a photo of what that would have looked like. Let's see, there you go. So what I see on my screen, just due to the orientation here, is there's an app wipe alert. No, none of the OneDrive files, none of those, that partner data, the Excel spreadsheets, they're all gone from this device. Any personal files are still here. I can hand this back to my kids, I can walk away from the company, maybe I'm a consultant that no longer works with this particular business. Again, my personal photos didn't get deleted. This works on your iPad, will work on your phone, work on any of these devices, and all straight from Office 365. Now, since we don't want to shortchange you on any demos, one thing that I promised Levon I would do, since I do have network working, is complete the ATP demo, since it also relates a little bit to that end user, that people-centric. So the experience, if I bring up my email again, I believe I have the same email that Levon was showing. Let me go to my inbox. And this was the email that he was showing you on his iPad. Now, he didn't have connectivity, so he couldn't click on the link. So switching gears, thinking about that advanced threat protection and how we protect the end user from malicious links, whether those malicious links are malicious at send time or they become malicious later, which is a common attack vector recently. If I clicked on this first link, it says Bing, looks like it went to Bing. If I click on the third link, which I know is the spam link, it's actually going through EOP, it's going through Exchange Online Protection, and it's showing the end user that this website has been classified as malicious. Obviously, there's a link, you can talk to their IT organization, but again, the user was protected. The user was protected even though the link may not have been malicious at the get-go. So, we've seen DLP in OneDrive. It's currently in a limited preview, and it's going broad preview in June for both OneDrive and SharePoint. Same thing with Office 2016 clients. Those are aligned using the same functionality. And then the Office 365 device protection, that selective wipe, is available right now. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rudy.
Okay, so lots of demos, some very early, some a little bit further along, some enhancements to our existing capabilities. But really, I wanted to throw up for you sort of how the protection portfolio looks for 365. Clearly, we think about apps, we think about devices, and we think about services. And we have a lot of components that we sort of thematically try to tie together for you. Again, to recap, we think about pervasiveness, we think about transparency, and we think about involving our users. It would be remiss, because we talked a lot about servers, to not address services, to not address servers. And I do want to mention that a lot of the work you're seeing now in terms of the demos, we think about it as cloud hardened first and then into our servers. And you can see that because in the cloud we have control of all the servers, and you may have multiple servers, we think about value, and we think about value to you as well as feature sets that now span across clients and services to bring really unified protection, unified compliance. And so we've gone from really just individual server compliance to now a suite across your data. And to really think, to drive home the how is this helping, I wanted to show you some proof point stats of where are we today? How is all this looking today in the capabilities we have in the service that are making their way out of preview, and then we'll have on servers as well. So just take a look at some of these numbers. Every minute, we've got 10 million spam messages that are being blocked in the service. We're seeing massive amounts of growth in DLP. We have 185 million hits today for sensitive information in the service, authored by policy and you. And you can kind of see as I go through this, the numbers are massive. The 100 million audit events already flowing through, and we basically only have a few tenants that are using this in the early preview. And incredible amounts of growth in encrypted messages given our current environment and where people are more and more aware of their data. 600% growth in our capacity for the service in terms of what we have allocated to compliance and to security for your organizations. Where are we going? The cloud's going to continue to get better. We're going to bring these to the server as well. We're going to keep innovating faster. Mobile first, cloud first is Microsoft. In terms of protection, we're also people first. We're going to build a partner ecosystem, and thank you to our partners that have already signed up. Continue to sign up, and you're going to see us go across workloads, clients, and other services. In wrapping up, I wanted to give you a lot of session detail because you've seen a lot of demos, whirlwind, very early. But each of these will be a double click on each of the things we talked to you about. So you can pick out some of these. Hopefully they're not sort of back to back, so you can stagger them out. But there's a lot more to go through in terms of this message to you, which is 365 is going to take care of compliance and security in your data's regard, as well as work well with other systems and other partners to really round out a portfolio so that you can think about one-stop, single solution for your data. Thank you.